All right, everybody, good afternoon. We've got ourselves another head coaching candidate before these playoff games start. Have fun with watching those, by the way. I know most of you guys will be. And this one's interesting because this is one of those guys who is a little bit older. He's been around a while, and he already had a head coaching opportunity, and it went so unbelievably badly that it seemed like he was never going to get another chance again. But here we are, over a decade later. This guy's done so well that he might get a second look here. And I'm very wary of that. I am aware that some of these coaches are able to learn from their first failure and do better the next time. I am aware that they do learn things. I mean, Pete Carroll's kind of an example of that, right? But Steve Spagnuolo fell on his face so badly when he got given a head coaching opportunity beyond what Pete Carroll was doing in New England, beyond what Pete Carroll failed at in New England. Pete Carroll in New England had a winning record, right? Pete Carroll in New England actually won more than he lost. I think he even won a playoff game. Spags, his time with the Rams was quite possibly the low point of a very, very poor franchise for over a decade. A team that was completely non competitive and uninteresting for, I think, over a decade between the start of the Mike Martz era and the start of the Sean McVay era when things were really, really bad. He might have been the low point. So right away, I'm like, I feel like I've already seen this movie. However, what has happened since his opportunity to be the head coach of the then St. Louis Rams? A lot. And let's cover it. Let's give him an honest chance here because this most recent season for Spags has been awesome. He's been the Kansas City Chiefs defensive coordinator for the last 5 seasons, won 2 Super Bowls, and he's coached 4 defenses that were top 10 in points allowed. This most recent season, they were second in the league in points allowed per game, 17.3. Phenomenal work. And in EPA, they were sixth. Now, little bit of a warning sign here. A lot of these seasons, especially 2021, 2020, 2019, their EPA was way worse than their points allowed, which tells you there might be some smoke and mirrors there. There might be a little bit of stuff going on there that isn't totally sustainable. They were top 10 in points per game allowed, but they were bottom half in EPA allowed per play. That tells you maybe, just maybe, that there's some stuff there that was a little bit lucky because EPA tends to monitor the ebbs and flows of a game better than just points. But he did great work in Kansas City this most recent year. That's not a defense with a ton of super blue chip talent. It's got a lot of like second round caliber guys that he's built around. He's got Chris Jones, which is great, but he's done a great job building around guys like Trent McDuffie. He's done a great job getting great things out of guys like Nick Bolton. And this year their defense has been borderline elite, probably elite, and they needed it because their offense was not the same this year. So great work by Spags in Kansas City, not taking anything away from it. And even when the defense isn't all that great, like last year in the Super Bowl when Jalen Hurts dumped all over them, they still forced a defensive touchdown that was huge in turning that game around. So even when things aren't great, he still finds a way to do something positive to help the team win, even when the body of work is not necessarily good. Before that, he went to the New York Giants. He was a Giants defensive coordinator for 3 years, under 1 year of Tom Coughlin, and then the Ben McAdoo era, where 2 years it was really bad. 2017, the Giants were just an atrocious team, one of the worst teams in the league. They couldn't stop the other teams from scoring. Their EPA was bad. And 2015 was also really bad. That was a year where their offense was actually elite and it didn't matter. 30th in points allowed, 30th in EPA per play. However, 2016, that defense was elite. That was the year the Giants spent big money on guys like Janoris Jenkins and, let's see, there was Janoris Jenkins, there was Olivier Vernon, there was Damon Snacks Harrison. So they spent a bunch of money on defensive players, and they had one of the best defenses in the league. They squeaked out the playoffs with McAdoo. Second in points per game, fourth in EPA per play. Great defense. So even in New York, he was able to get some really good stuff done. Just it didn't last, and when McAdoo got fired, he actually became the interim head coach for like 4 games. They went 1-3. I don't really have much to say about that because it wasn't a big enough sample size. But okay, not bad. Baltimore Ravens, he spent 2 years there. 2014, he was the secondary coach. Some of the defensive backs he coached during this time: Darian Stewart, Matt Elam, Lardarius Webb, Will Hill, Jimmy Smith. Not bad. But it's not like he was really responsible for developing any of those guys. He just walked into them. And the year before that, 2013, he was the senior defensive assistant in Baltimore for a defense that was above average. 12th in points per game allowed, 10th in EPA per play. Pretty good. But again, the defense was good mostly before he got there. It's not like he was responsible for building it or anything like that. Ravens defense has generally, typically, always been pretty good. The 2013 defense was probably not even as good as some of the recent Ravens defenses, so I don't know what to say about that. Just kind of a couple years where you're working, and that's all there is to it. He spent 1 year as the defensive coordinator in New Orleans. I believe this was the Sean Payton suspension year, and they had maybe the worst defense in the league. 28.4 points per game, 31st, and they were 30th in EPA per play allowed. So really bad. Okay, now we're getting into stuff that we don't like so much, right? Like, that's not okay. I know the Saints didn't have the most defensive talent, but they had more talent than this. This is absurd. This is obscene. And then we get to his head coaching tenure and how this guy managed to maintain his career after what he did in with the Rams, followed by what he did with the Saints, is kind of crazy. 2011 was kind of the make or break year for him, and he went 2-14 and had a bad defense, 26th, 25.4 points per game, which was really bad for that era. His one decent year was 2010, 7-9, 20.5 points a game, 12th. So he had a slightly above average defense. And that was the Rams team that should have made the playoffs, but they lost the Week 17 game to Charlie Whitehurst in Seattle, 13-6. So Seattle got to go to the playoffs instead and win a playoff game, all thanks to Spags' crew not getting the job done against our backup quarterback in Week 17. And then his first year was a complete abomination. 1-15, 27.3 points a game, one of the worst defenses in the league. So he won 10 games in 3 years as the Rams head coach. 10 games he won. You usually don't get a second chance at head coaching after this. So honestly, I look at this and I go, that should be enough. But hey, here we are having this conversation. Now, Spags really made his name in New York with the Giants as the defensive coordinator from 07 to 08. Now, the 2007 Giants defense was average, but in the playoffs, they hit the afterburners and won the Super Bowl, stifling the Brady Patriots, the 16-0 Patriots. They stifled the Tony Romo Cowboys. They stifled Brett Favre's last year with the Packers offense. He did so much good work in that playoff run that he became a top head coaching candidate that offseason. Went back to New York and quarterbacked a top 5 defense, 5th in the league in scoring. So super, super great stuff here, and this is why he got the head coaching opportunity he did. So if you want to go back further than that, and again, we're getting into territory here where it doesn't really matter that much because this stuff happened almost 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago. But if you want to go back to the origins of Spags, it's basically Philadelphia. He got his start in Philadelphia under Jim Johnson, and that's a pretty good place to start your coaching career, admittedly. So just to go over it real quick, just for fun while we're here, Philadelphia, he was the linebacker coach for 3 years from 04 to 06. That was a Eagles team that went to the Super Bowl. Coaching guys like Jeremiah Trotter, Donnie Jones, Matt McCoy, Omar Gaither, Sean Barber, Keith Adams, Mark Simino, Ike Reese, Nate Wayne. I mean, that defense in Philly was good mostly during these 3 years. So you look at these names and you're like, other than Jeremiah Trotter, who really stands out here? So you can say that the Eagles were getting quite a bit out of not hugely prolific names. So not bad work. I tip my cap to him for that. And then there was the phenomenal work he did as a defensive back coach during the Eagles' 3 straight NFC Championship game losses from 01 to 03. Michael Lewis made a Pro Bowl. Troy Vincent was a Pro Bowler. Clinton Hart, Lito Shepard, Pro Bowler. Sheldon Brown, Pro Bowler. Brian Dawkins, future Hall of Famer, I think. Roderick Hood, Bobby Taylor. He was a guy who was very prolific for a while there. Blaine Bishop. You had some Al Harris mixed in as well before he went to Green Bay. Damon Moore. Like, the Eagles secondary was the envy of the rest of the NFL during this era. Look at all these big prolific names they had. These guys making Pro Bowls and all pro teams, making plays. Like, this was some really great stuff. Remember, Jim Johnson spent most of his time as the defensive coordinator there. You know he loves to blitz. So that secondary's got to be rock solid to hold up. So, yeah, great stuff here. Defensive assistant for 2 years prior to that in 1999, 2000. 2000, they had an elite defense. The year before, it was a pretty bad defense. But you can kind of see why he was such a hot commodity after Philly. Look at all the good stuff he touched. But for me personally, I kind of stand where I stand. This guy already had his chance as a head coach. It was a complete unmitigated disaster. And while he has done a great job this most recent year in Kansas City, he's clearly a guy who is much better off as a coordinator. We have enough information to know this. So Spags, to me, would be not such a good hire. We can do better. We better be able to do better. And I'm not really feeling this one, even though I want to give him a lot of credit because I think he's overachieved with what he's done in Kansas City this year. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Enjoy the playoffs later today. And we'll see who else we can come up with as we continue to spin through these head coaching candidates. But let me know what you think about this one, because this one might be a little polarizing.